It was just past dawn in the quiet town of Lewistown, Montana, when Dr. Marcus Ellison's truck rolled into the narrow gravel parking lot behind his small veterinary clinic. Mist still clung to the open fields, and the only sounds were the distant cawing of crows and the soft crunch of tires over frozen dirt. The world was just waking up, but Marcus was already thinking ahead. Appointments, surgeries, the pile of paperwork that always seemed to grow overnight. He grabbed his coffee and shouldered his worn leather satchel, ready to begin another predictable day. But as he turned the corner toward the back entrance, something unexpected made him pause. A plain cardboard box, sealed with packing tape, was tucked against the iron gate. The box was battered, one side dented as if it had been kicked or dropped in a hurry. Even from a few feet away, Marcus could see the dark stains soaking into the bottom. Something inside was leaking. He set down his satchel, suddenly alert, his heart thumping with the dread that comes from too many years of seeing animals abandoned at his door. Marcus crouched beside the box, his breath fogging in the chill. He pressed his fingers against the lid. Warmth radiated from inside. A faint, desperate scratching reached his ears, then a soft whimper. He found his keys, sliced through the tape, and peeled back the flaps, bracing himself for what he might find. Inside, curled on a threadbare towel, was a German Shepherd puppy. He was shockingly small for his breed, his fur caked with dirt and blood, ribs pushing out from beneath patchy, dull hair. His eyes were a deep, desperate brown, frightened but alert, searching Marcus's face for meaning. One ear flopped to the side, the other standing awkwardly at attention. The puppy's breathing was shallow, each exhale a shiver, but his tail beat weakly against the cardboard as Marcus reached inside. "Hey there, buddy," Marcus whispered, keeping his voice low and gentle, as if afraid to break something fragile in the morning air. He slid his hands under the pup's trembling body. The dog didn't snap or snarl. Instead, he licked Marcus's thumb, tongue rough and warm, a tiny gesture of hope despite the pain written all over his small frame. Marcus scanned for a tag, a note, anything that might explain who had left the puppy and why. There was nothing, just an old towel and a few crumbs of moldy bread tossed in as if that counted for care. For a moment, Marcus felt the familiar ache behind his sternum, the anger and sadness that always hit him when he saw animals treated like disposable things. But he shook it off and shifted into action. He was a healer first. With quick practice movements, Marcus carried the box inside, nudging the clinic door open with his elbow. The building still smelled faintly of antiseptic and yesterday's rain. Everything washed clean, but not yet awake. He set the puppy gently on the heated exam table, flipping on the lamp to get a better look. "Let's see what they did to you," Marcus murmured, running careful hands over the dog's body. Bite wounds, some old, some fresh, crisscrossed his hind legs and belly. One paw was swollen, a cut on his ear still oozing. There was a bruise along his side, purple and yellow beneath the thin fur. Someone had tried to patch him up with a dirty bandage, but it only made things worse. Through it all, the pup made no sound, only turning his head to follow Marcus's movements, his tail thumping weakly as if to say, "Please don't leave." Outside, the sun was breaking through the clouds, spilling golden light across the clinic floor. But inside, time felt frozen, a fragile moment hanging between suffering and rescue. As Marcus worked, he kept talking softly, telling the puppy about the day ahead, the dogs he would meet, the way the robins always sang outside his window. He hoped his voice would soothe the fear in those deep brown eyes. Once the puppy was stable, an IV line in his leg and a soft blanket tucked around his body, Marcus sat beside the table and watched him breathe. The dog drifted in and out of sleep, waking only to whimper or shift closer to Marcus's hand. There was something about him, a stubborn will to live, a flicker of trust not yet extinguished by the cruelty he'd survived. As the morning picked up, Marcus went through his rounds, but his thoughts kept drifting back to the little survivor. Between appointments, he checked on the pup, changing bandages, warming fresh broth, murmuring encouragements as he stroked the battered head. The clinic staff peeked in, asking quietly what had happened, but Marcus only shook his head. He didn't have answers, just questions that pressed heavier with every passing hour. Who could leave a living thing like this, broken and helpless, in a cardboard box at the edge of town? What kind of person walked away and didn't look back? And most of all, why? Why this dog, on this day, in this place? By noon, word had already spread around town. There's a new rescue at Ellison's clinic. Looks rough. A real fighter. People called with guesses. Neighbors stopped by with blankets and food, some just to stand in the doorway and look. But no one claimed the puppy. No one admitted to knowing anything about a German shepherd with old scars and a will to survive. And so, as the day faded into a soft Montana evening, Marcus found himself sitting by the exam table, the little dog curled at his feet, both of them listening to the distant sounds of a world that kept moving, even as their own had come to a sudden, silent pause. Marcus reached down, ruffling the soft fur behind the puppy's ear, and made a quiet promise. "You're not alone now," he said, voice barely above a whisper. "Not anymore. We're going to find out who you are. And you're going to make it." The puppy's tail thumped twice, soft, hopeful, against the blanket, as if he believed it too. The next 24 hours at Ellison Veterinary Clinic blurred into a series of urgent movements and hushed reassurances. Dr. Marcus Ellison worked with the single-minded focus of someone who had seen too many close calls, who knew that sometimes survival came down to the smallest details and the quietest acts of care. He barely left the battered puppy's side, only pausing to wash his hands or answer the clinic phone, his mind never straying far from the tiny life he was fighting to save. Through the thick pane of the treatment room window, the world outside spun on. Families dropped off pets for routine checkups. An elderly woman came in with her one-eyed tabby. A rancher with a limping border collie. Each time Marcus stepped into the waiting area, he wore his usual calm smile, but beneath it, his heart raced. He worried that if he let his guard down for even a moment, the puppy, now dubbed Finn, though he hadn't announced the name to anyone yet, might slip away, like so many lost causes before. Back in the quiet of the treatment room, Marcus talked softly to Finn as he cleaned each wound. "This is gonna sting a little, buddy," he'd murmur, moving with gentle hands and steady nerves. Finn never snapped or growled, even as Marcus flushed out dirt and infection, or prodded around cracked ribs and torn skin. There was only a flinch, a shiver, and those deep brown eyes, watching, hopeful, hungry for every moment of kindness. As dusk fell, the clinic emptied out. Marcus stayed late, monitoring Finn's temperature, adjusting his IV fluids, and gently encouraging him to take a sip of water or a lick of warm broth. Sometimes he'd hum a tune his grandmother used to sing, something soft, something that made the silence less sharp. Finn would press himself closer to Marcus's arm, sometimes sighing so deeply it broke Marcus's heart a little more each time. The trauma Finn had suffered was written all over his body. The fresh wounds on his side, the old scars that crossed his muzzle, the way he curled himself into a tight ball whenever a sudden noise echoed through the clinic. Marcus made careful notes on the pup's chart. Temperature fluctuations, appetite, the color of his gums. But he also started jotting down things that didn't belong in a medical record, tail wagged at 3:20 a.m. when I walked in, or looked up when I said, "Good boy." By the time midnight rolled around, Marcus could barely keep his eyes open. He set up a folding cot in the corner and pulled it close to Finn's kennel, just within reach. Every few hours, he woke to check on the puppy, sometimes finding Finn whimpering, legs twitching as if outrunning nightmares, sometimes catching him dozing, tiny tongue poking out, finally at peace. The moments when Finn's tail would thump against the blanket in the darkness were the moments that gave Marcus hope. He saw signs of resilience in Finn that he'd rarely witnessed in a dog so young. Once, when a thunderstorm rattled the window panes, Finn tensed, trembling violently, but he didn't retreat to the far corner of his kennel. Instead, he pressed his face to the wire door and stared at Marcus, as if drawing courage from his presence. Marcus, groggy and stiff, shuffled over, knelt beside the kennel, and reached in to gently scratch Finn's ear. The shaking slowed, then stopped. In those small hours, Marcus found himself talking aloud, sometimes about clinic routines, sometimes about the stories he'd heard from other animal rescuers, Sometimes just about the sky outside. "You know, Finn," he'd say, almost joking, "I think you're the bravest patient I've ever had." Finn would wag his tail, the gesture slow but determined, a signal that he understood, at least a little. The staff noticed the change, too, when they came in the next morning. Linda, the head tech, peeked into the treatment room, her expression softening as she saw Marcus asleep in the chair, Finn curled up beside him on the floor instead of in his kennel. "He won't stay put unless Marcus is close by," she whispered to the others, her eyes a mixture of concern and admiration. "He acts like he finally found his person." Throughout the day, Finn's progress was measured in tiny victories. He took his first tentative steps outside his kennel, wobbling across the slick linoleum floor before collapsing in a heap by Marcus's feet. He managed a few sips of broth, then a mouthful of soft food. When Marcus gently bathed the dirt and blood from Finn's fur, the puppy leaned into his touch, closing his eyes and letting out a sigh so deep it sounded like relief itself. But not everything was easy. Finn flinched at sudden movements, Linda dropping a clipboard, a door slamming shut. Even the rattle of a medicine bottle could send him scrambling for cover. Once, when a large male client in a heavy jacket strode into the back room without knocking, Finn cowered under the exam table, refusing to come out until Marcus knelt beside him and whispered reassurances. These moments angered Marcus more than he wanted to admit. He knew the signs of abuse, the way Finn pressed himself to the ground, head low, ears back, ready for a blow. But there was never a hint of aggression. Even when Marcus had to clean his deepest wounds or give injections, Finn never snapped, never growled. His only defenses were flight and the desperate hope that kindness might still exist somewhere in the world. At the end of a long, tense day, Marcus made the decision official. He scribbled Finn's new name on the intake form, Finn meaning fair or blessed. A name that spoke of survival and the faintest promise of luck, turning at last. The staff gathered around, snapping photos for the clinic's bulletin board, passing Finn from hand to hand, each of them murmuring encouragements and marveling at the transformation in his eyes. As Marcus turned off the clinic lights and carried Finn into his small apartment above the practice, he paused at the top of the stairs, looking out at the starlit fields beyond. Finn snuggled into the crook of his arm, sighing with contentment as if, for the first time in his short, difficult life, he truly believed he was safe. "Welcome home, Finn," Marcus whispered, feeling the gravity of the moment settle into his bones. Outside, the sky was velvet dark, sprinkled with the first stars of the evening, and inside, a battered German shepherd puppy, no longer just a survivor but something new, curled up in a warm bed, no longer hungry, no longer alone, and for the first time, dreaming of what tomorrow might bring. It was 3 days after Finn arrived at the clinic, and the spring air in Lewistown was still crisp, the scent of wet earth drifting through the open window above the reception desk. The little German shepherd was healing, but progress came in cautious steps. Marcus had started taking him outside during the quiet hours before the clinic opened, letting him sniff around at the backyard where wildflowers poked through the grass. Finn would stay close, tail wagging hesitantly, pausing every so often to look back at Marcus as if to ask, "Is this really okay?" On that morning, the clinic had just started buzzing, a pair of kittens for vaccinations, an anxious farmer with a cow in labor, the usual parade of faces that made up the rhythm of Marcus's days. Linda was prepping a room when she noticed a shadow in the front window, a teenage girl, thin and pale, lingering just outside. She wore a faded red hoodie, the sleeves chewed at the cuffs, and in her arms she clutched something to her chest, face hidden beneath the hood. Marcus was about to greet the next patient when Linda appeared at his elbow, voice low. "There's someone at the door. Looks nervous." He stepped into the lobby just as the door creaked open. The girl hesitated on the threshold, brown eyes darting from Marcus to the exam rooms and back. In her hands, she clutched an old, cracked leather collar and a small plastic bag of kibble. Her sneakers were caked with mud, and one of the laces trailed behind her, half untied. For a heartbeat, Marcus saw someone who looked impossibly young, scared, uncertain, balancing on the edge of running away. "Hi there," Marcus said gently, lowering himself to her eye level and keeping his tone soft, inviting. You need some help? The girl nodded, throat working as if she was trying to swallow something too big. Is the dog okay? The German Shepherd puppy, is he? Her voice caught, and she squeezed the collar tighter. Marcus's chest tightened. He's safe. He's inside, healing up. Slow, but steady. You know him? She hesitated, glancing at the ground. Sort of. I'm the one who left him here. I didn't know what else to do. The room went quiet, just the hum of the old fridge and the distant bark of a dog outside. Marcus waited, giving her space. He'd learned over years that silence sometimes said more than any question. The girl took a shaky breath, blinking hard. He wasn't even my dog. Not really. My stepmom's boyfriend. He was going to drown him. Said he wasn't worth feeding anymore. Not after he got hurt. She bit her lip, knuckles white around the collar. I waited until everyone was asleep. Put him in a box with an old towel. Carried him out behind the fence. I hoped somebody would find him before morning. Tears shimmered in her eyes, but she didn't let them fall. Marcus felt the weight of her words. In his line of work, he'd met plenty of people who dumped the animals and vanished. But this wasn't that. This was a kid, desperate and terrified, who'd risked something to give a small creature a chance. You did something brave, he said quietly, moving to the side to let her sit in the waiting area. You saved his life. She shook her head, eyes wet with guilt. I should have done more. I wanted to keep him, but they... She trailed off, jaw clenched. I had to leave him. I didn't want him to die, scared and alone. Marcus reached out, resting a comforting hand on her shoulder. Hey, sometimes you can't fix everything, but you did the most important thing. You gave him a shot. A tense silence followed, broken only by the click of Finn's nails as Linda led him quietly into the lobby. Finn paused at the threshold, sniffed the air, then saw the girl, and stopped. He took a few tentative steps, ears pricking, then approached with a hesitant wag of his tail. The girl dropped to her knees, collar and kibble forgotten on the floor. Hey, buddy, she whispered. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. Finn nosed her hand, his tail picking up speed. She wrapped her arms around his neck, pressing her face into his fur, and for the first time since walking in, she let the tears fall. Finn licked her cheek, whining softly, as if to say he understood. Marcus stepped back, letting the two of them have a moment. Even Linda wiped at her eyes, pretending she was busy with paperwork. The girl finally let go, straightening her hoodie and wiping her face. His name was Bear before. I called him that. But you should call him something new. He deserves a new start. Marcus smiled gently. We've been calling him Finn. It means fair or blessed. Seemed like he needed a little luck. The girl let out a watery laugh. Yeah, he does. He really does. For the next few minutes, they talked quietly about Finn's progress, about the things he still feared, about the soft toy he'd become attached to. The girl listened intently, nodding at each update, asking small questions about his favorite food and whether he'd ever run again. Marcus didn't press for details about her home life, about the adults she lived with, or whether she felt safe. He could see enough in her body language, the hunched shoulders, the way she kept looking over her shoulder, the tension in her voice. He simply reassured her, told her she was always welcome to check on Finn, that the clinic would take care of him, no matter what. As she stood to leave, she picked up the old collar, turning it over in her hands. Don't let anyone hurt him again, she whispered, the plea heavy with memories. I promise, Marcus said. Well, and he meant it. She stepped outside, pausing on the steps to look back one last time. Finn pressed his nose to the glass, watching her go. Tail still wagging, but slower now, as if sensing the sadness in her goodbye. For the rest of the afternoon, the clinic seemed quieter. Marcus found himself thinking about the girl, about all the invisible battles kids fought in small towns where people assumed everything was fine. He wondered if she'd come back, if she had someone to talk to, if she'd be okay. That night, as he sat with Finn curled beside him, Marcus replayed the conversation in his mind. He realized that, sometimes, rescue wasn't about grand gestures or perfect solutions. And sometimes, it was about giving someone a chance to heal, to hope, to start over. And as Finn slept soundly for the first time since arriving, Marcus knew that both the dog and the girl had taken the first steps towards something better, even if the path ahead was still uncertain. The next morning, Marcus found a note slipped under the clinic door. In hurried handwriting, it read, "Thank you for taking care of him. He's a good dog. Please let him be happy." Underneath was a tiny heart. Drawn in shaky pen, Marcus smiled, folded the note into his wallet, and made another silent promise. To Finn, to the girl, and to himself. The days slipped by, marked by the rhythm of the clinic in the changing Montana sky. Each morning, Marcus found Finn curled up at the foot of his bed, his battered frame a little less fragile, his eyes a little brighter. For the first time in Finn's short life, healing was happening faster than harm. It wasn't just the wounds on his body. The deeper, invisible ones seemed to be stitching themselves together, too, in small, almost miraculous ways. The staff at Ellison Veterinary Clinic became part of Finn's world. Linda always greeted him with a smile and a soft pat, while Edgar, the shy assistant who usually avoided the animals, would sit cross-legged on the floor with Finn during lunch breaks, sharing little bits of ham and whispered encouragements. Each of them was rooting for the German shepherd puppy in their own quiet way. Despite the care and affection, Finn's journey was not without setbacks. There were days when his legs trembled so violently that Marcus worried he'd collapse. Sometimes he startled at a dropped tray or a stranger's loud laugh, retreating beneath the counter or into the safety of Marcus's shadow. But gradually, his confidence grew, measured in inches and heartbeats. One afternoon a storm rolled in, thunder booming across the prairie, wind rattling the old clinic windows. The lights flickered as rain pelted the glass. The staff were used to Montana's moods, but Finn pressed himself under the exam table, shivering, eyes wide with panic. Marcus slid onto the floor beside him, his voice low and soothing as he spoke about rain and rivers, about how storms always pass. It was in the lull after that storm that the clinic experienced something small but monumental. Finn's first stand. The clinic had emptied out for the day, the staff winding down as the last client, a gray-haired woman with a geriatric poodle, exited with a wave. The silence that followed felt full, not empty, like the quiet before something good. Marcus was cleaning up in the back, humming absent-mindedly, when he heard a faint scrabble of claws on linoleum. He looked up to see Finn, still wobbly, dragging himself out from beneath a rolling chair. His paws shook, but his eyes were focused. He took a tentative step forward, then another, crossing the clinic floor in slow motion, muscles quivering, tail up just enough to show hope. Marcus froze, afraid even a word might break the moment. The staff turned to watch, breath held, as Finn took one more step, then another, his gait growing steadier with each inch. Halfway across the room, his legs buckled, and for a second it looked like he might fall. But Finn lifted his head, locked his gaze on Marcus, and pushed himself upright again. The little dog stood tall, chest out, as if daring the world to try him one more time. A stunned silence hung in the air. Then Linda clapped her hands, and the rest of the team cheered, their voices rising in a joyous chorus that filled the clinic with warmth and light. Finn's tail wagged so hard it threatened to knock him off balance again, but he didn't seem to mind. For the first time, he stood on his own terms, no longer a victim of his past. Marcus grinned, blinking away tears he hadn't realized were coming. He crossed the room, knelt down, and scooped Finn into his arms, holding him close as the staff gathered around. "You did it, buddy," he whispered, voice thick with pride. "You really did it." To mark the occasion, Marcus dug into a drawer and pulled out a bright yellow stuffed giraffe, the kind of toy he usually reserved for his hardest cases, the ones who needed a little extra magic. He presented it to Finn with a flourish. The puppy sniffed the toy, nudged it with his nose, then seized it in his mouth, trotting in a wide circle with a newfound swagger. From that moment on, the giraffe became Finn's talisman, He wouldn't nap unless it was tucked beneath his chin. He carried it everywhere, even trying to sneak it into Marcus's office during appointments. When other dogs barked or the world grew too loud, Finn pressed the giraffe close, drawing comfort from its softness. The toy also became a symbol for the clinic staff, a reminder of resilience and second chances. Patients and their families noticed, too. Children coming in for checkups would ask about the dog with the yellow giraffe, and Linda would tell them how Finn fought to stand, how he never gave up. Finn's progress wasn't just physical. He started to show glimmers of his true personality, gentle, curious, eager to please. He'd approach strangers with cautious optimism, his tail wagging in slow, hopeful sweeps. Sometimes, during slow afternoons, Marcus would sit in the sunlit waiting room, Finn beside him, and watch the way the puppy tracked birds outside or cocked his head at distant laughter. But there were setbacks, too. On one occasion, a large burly man with heavy boots stomped into the clinic, his deep voice booming as he complained about his bulldog's limp. Finn shrank back, hackles raised, the old terror flickering in his eyes. Marcus gently called him over, holding out the giraffe, and Finn approached, trembling, then settled with the toy between his paws. It was a quiet victory, a moment where fear gave way, however briefly, to trust. As the weeks passed, Finn's attachment to Marcus and the giraffe deepened. He followed the veterinarian from room to room, flopping at his feet during surgeries, watching every movement with intense loyalty. The staff teased Marcus, calling Finn his shadow, but Marcus didn't mind. He welcomed the company and the reminder that, sometimes, the smallest lives could change the biggest hearts. One evening, after a long day, Marcus sat with Finn on the porch of his upstairs apartment, watching the Montana sunset bleed across the sky. The prairie grasses rustled in the wind, and Finn rested his head on Marcus's lap, giraffe clutched tight. Marcus stroked his ears, marveling at how far they'd come together. "You're a tough little guy," he said softly, voice thick with emotion. "Whatever happens next, you've already won." As dusk gave way to darkness, Finn drifted to sleep, the giraffe rising and falling with each breath. The world outside kept spinning, but for the first time, Finn's world felt steady, safe, and filled with hope. It was a chilly Saturday afternoon when the Jensen family first came through the doors of Ellison Veterinary Clinic. The sky outside was a steel gray, low clouds threatening a late spring rain. Finn lay curled on his favorite blanket behind the reception desk, his yellow giraffe tucked under one paw. He perked up as soon as the door chimed, ears twitching at the unfamiliar voices and footsteps. Marcus recognized the couple right away. Tom and Rachel Jensen were regulars, farmers from just outside town. But today, their faces looked more drawn than usual, their eyes shadowed by worry and a kind of quiet heartbreak that needed no words. Between them, holding tightly to Rachel's hand, was their son Caleb. The boy looked about 7, his sandy hair a tangle beneath his hood, his cheeks pale, eyes wide and hollow. Marcus smiled, gentle and warm. "Hey, Tom." "Rachel. And this must be Caleb, right?" Caleb didn't answer, only glanced up with a blank, distant expression. Rachel managed a brittle smile. "We lost Rosie. The house fire. She didn't make it out. Caleb's been—" She hesitated, then squeezed her son's hand. "He hasn't spoken since." Tom cleared his throat, his voice thick. "He just sits and stares. School says it's Rama. We thought maybe being around animals again, it might help." Marcus nodded, understanding without needing any more explanation. He gestured for them to follow him to one of the quieter exam rooms, where the lights were softer and a basket of toys sat in the corner. Finn, curious, padded after them, his toy giraffe swinging from his mouth. As Rachel and Tom settled into the chairs, Caleb stood silently in the middle of the room, hands deep in his pockets. He looked so small in that big, silent space, dwarfed by grief and by the weight of what he'd lost. Marcus knelt to Finn's level, whispering in his ear, "Let's see if you can help, buddy." Finn approached Caleb with cautious steps, his movements slow and respectful. He dropped the giraffe by his own feet and then sat, watching the boy with gentle eyes. At first, Caleb didn't react. He just stared at the floor, shoulders slumped. Finn waited, sensing the boy's sadness, making no move to push or beg for attention. He simply was, present, patient, and accepting. Minutes passed, stretching out as Tom and Rachel shared small, hopeful glances. Marcus waited too, not wanting to force the moment. He'd learned that true healing took its own path and time. Finn lay down, his head flat against the cold tile. With a sigh, he inched forward, closing the distance between himself and Caleb. He gently nudged Caleb's shoe with his nose. Just once. A soft, deliberate gesture. Caleb glanced down. His eyes met Finn's, and for a moment something flickered. Confusion, maybe, or surprise at the softness of this battered pup who carried his own scars. Finn didn't look away. He nudged Caleb's hand, then rested his head on the boy's sneaker, closing his eyes as if to say, "I trust you, even if you're hurting." The room felt impossibly still, everyone holding their breath. Then, as if a dam had cracked, Caleb crouched beside Finn, one tentative hand hovering over the dog's head. He hesitated, then stroked Finn's fur, clumsy but gentle. The boy's voice, thin and raspy from disuse, floated up. "You're warm," Rachel gasped, tears filling her eyes. Tom sat up straight, jaw trembling. Marcus blinked, his heart soaring. Finn didn't move, didn't wag or bark. He simply pressed closer, as if understanding that this moment needed to be protected. For the first time in weeks, Caleb smiled. A tiny, uncertain thing, but real. Rachel knelt beside her son, wrapping them both in a gentle hug. "That's right, honey. He's warm. Just like Rosie was." Tom wiped his eyes with a calloused hand, unable to hide his relief. "Thank you, Doc. Thank you." Marcus shook his head, his gaze never leaving Finn and Caleb. "It wasn't me. Sometimes animals just know what we need." Caleb sat with Finn for the next half hour, running his fingers through the dog's fur, whispering words that only Finn could hear. The giraffe toy, ignored at first, soon became part of their little circle. Caleb squeezed it, then offered it to Finn, who took it with a soft woof and dropped it in the boy's lap. They shared the toy, passing it back and forth, neither needing anyone else to explain what it meant. The rest of the clinic faded into background noise. For Marcus, time seemed to pause. He saw not just a boy finding comfort in a dog, but two souls recognizing each other's broken places and offering acceptance. Rachel and Tom left the room briefly to fill out paperwork. Marcus lingered in the doorway, giving the pair their privacy, but keeping watch in case the spell broke. He saw Caleb leaning close, burying his face in Finn's neck. A muffled sob shook the boy's frame, but when he pulled back, there was determination in his eyes. A spark Marcus hadn't seen before. Finn licked the salty tear from Caleb's cheek, then pressed his nose to the boy's chest, right over his heart. Caleb giggled, a fragile sound, but music to his parents' ears. By the time the Jensens were ready to leave, Caleb was talking in quiet sentences, asking when he could see Finn again, if maybe the dog could visit his school someday, if he'd remember him. Rachel promised they'd come back soon. As the family walked out, Marcus crouched beside Finn and hugged him tight. "You did good, buddy. You did real good." That night, after the clinic had closed and silence returned, Marcus found Finn lying on his blanket. The giraffe nestled between his paws. The dog looked up at him with gentle, trusting eyes, eyes that seemed to say, "I know what it means to lose, but I also know what it means to be found." And in that quiet, Marcus felt something new, a certainty that Finn was meant for more than just surviving. He was meant to help others heal, one broken heart at a time. After the afternoon with Caleb, something changed at the Ellison Veterinary Clinic. It wasn't just that Finn was stronger, or that his wounds were finally closing, though those things were true. It was as if the air itself had shifted, filling with a new kind of hope. People noticed. His clients lingered a little longer in the lobby. Marcus found himself humming again as he went through the motions of his work, noticing the lightness in his own chest. Even Finn, who had once lived curled into himself, now carried his head higher, as though he'd been given permission to imagine something better. The story of the silent boy and the battered puppy spread through the small Montana town like wind across wheat fields. People who'd never set foot in the clinic before came by just to say hi. Linda joked that Finn was more famous than Marcus, and maybe he was. Children tugged at their parents' hands as they passed the window, eager for a glimpse of the dog with the yellow giraffe. Sometimes the whole waiting room would go quiet as Finn walked by, his toy swinging from his mouth, and you could feel every eye in the place soften. But Marcus was paying attention to something deeper. He'd always known that animals could heal in ways people couldn't quite explain, but seeing Caleb change had reminded him of the power hidden in the simplest acts: a head resting on a knee, the gentle pressure of fur under trembling fingers. So one evening, after the clinic closed, Marcus stayed late, his desk covered with textbooks and notepads, research tabs open on his computer. He started reading about therapy dogs, about how the very traits Finn showed naturally could be trained and honed, used to help even more people. He watched videos of dogs visiting hospitals and schools. He read about trauma, about post-traumatic stress, about loneliness in elderly patients, and the comfort a dog could bring. Finn watched him from the rug, head cocked, as if he too sensed that something big was unfolding. Marcus set aside his books and called Finn over. "What do you think, buddy? Ready to go back to work? Just a different kind of work?" Finn's tail thumped. Marcus grinned. That was all the answer he needed. Training began simply. At first, it was just walks down the hall, learning to stay calm when strangers approached. Finn, with his gentle spirit, proved a quick study. Loud noises still made him flinch sometimes, and he sometimes shied away from sudden movements. But he always came back, always tried again. He learned to sit on command, to stay beside Marcus's side, to visit by putting his head in a patient's lap and waiting for permission to snuggle closer. Marcus made sure that the yellow giraffe was always nearby, Finn's anchor and his comfort. Soon, they started small field trips. First, the local elementary school. The principal, Mrs. Carter, had heard about Finn and was eager for the children to meet him. Marcus led Finn through the crowded halls, pausing as kids rushed over, squealing and reaching out with sticky hands. Finn handled the attention like a seasoned professional, his eyes calm and watchful. He chose, without prompting, to approach the shyest children first. The boy who hovered at the edge of the playground, the girl who hid behind her teacher's skirt. Each time he sat quietly, tail wagging, until the child reached out to pet him. Sometimes he'd drop his giraffe at their feet, as if offering a piece of his own courage. The impact was immediate and profound. Teachers wrote notes to Marcus, describing how students who never spoke in class now whispered to Finn, or how children who feared dogs found themselves giggling as Finn rolled over for a belly rub. One counselor said she'd never seen a more patient or empathetic animal. Next, Marcus and Finn visited the town's hospice center. There, the air was different, heavier, thick, with the weight of final goodbyes and lingering regrets. Finn seemed to sense this immediately. He moved slowly, respectfully, never forcing himself on anyone. Instead, he'd scan the room, find the person who sat alone or who stared at the floor, and settle beside them. Sometimes he'd nudge their hand, other times he simply offered his quiet presence. One afternoon, Finn sat for almost an hour with Mrs. Boudreau, a retired teacher whose cancer had come back after years in remission. She'd been weeping quietly when they arrived, but Finn curled at her feet and rested his head in her lap. Eventually, she reached down and stroked his fur, telling him about the students she missed, about the stories she'd never get to finish reading. Marcus listened from the doorway, feeling both the ache and the healing in the room. Word spread quickly about the miracle dog, about the puppy who'd almost died but now seemed to be helping everyone he met. Letters began to arrive at the clinic, from parents, teachers, even strangers who'd seen photos online. People wrote about their own losses and fears, about the hope they felt reading Finn's story. One child, whose father was deployed overseas, sent a drawing of Finn and his giraffe with the words, You make people feel better? Thank you, Finn, scrawled in uneven crayon. Marcus pinned every letter and picture to a wall in the clinic lobby. The collage grew week by week, a testament to the spreading ripples of Finn's new purpose. People started coming by just to see the wall, to add their own notes, or to read the stories others had left. And through it all, Finn thrived. He seemed to draw strength from each new encounter. After every visit, Marcus would bring him back to the apartment, give him a treat, and tell him, "You did good work today, buddy." Finn would curl up with his giraffe, exhausted but content. There were hard days, too. Sometimes Finn would come home and pace the apartment, eyes haunted by memories only he understood. Marcus would sit with him, rubbing his ears, reminding him he was safe. But those moments grew less frequent. More and more, Finn's life was defined by the lives he touched, not just the pain he carried. One evening, as the sun set behind the Montana hills, Marcus stood with Finn outside the clinic, watching the light fade. "You found your purpose, didn't you?" he murmured. Finn leaned against him, tail swishing gently. The answer was in his eyes, in the calmness of his breath. Together, they looked out at the world, two survivors, each finding new meaning in the healing of others. Sometimes, the biggest changes come quietly. Other times, they arrive like a summer thunderstorm, sudden, impossible to ignore, leaving everything different in their wake. For Finn, the battered German shepherd who had once lived inside a cardboard box, that storm of change came on a warm Thursday afternoon when a single photograph took his story far beyond the dusty streets of Lewistown, Montana. It started as a routine day at the clinic. Marcus and Finn were scheduled to visit the oncology wing at St. Joseph's Hospital, a small facility 2 hours away that treated children and adults battling cancers. The hospital staff had heard about Finn's visits to schools and hospice centers and hoped his gentle presence might ease the heavy atmosphere on their floor. Marcus packed up Finn's favorite treats, his yellow giraffe, and a new blue bandana, and together they made the drive through rolling hills and sun-dappled fields. The hospital smelled like antiseptic and hope, the first sharp, the second so subtle you almost missed it. Finn seemed to sense the anxiety beneath the surface, slowing his steps as Marcus led him through the halls. In each room, he moved quietly, approaching bedsides with caution. He'd rest his chin on the blanket of anyone who reached out, and for a little while, pain was softened by the simple weight of his head, by the warmth of his presence. In room 312, they met Lisa, an 8-year-old girl with a bald head and the fierce, unbreakable spirit of a wild Mustang. Lisa was alone, clutching a faded teddy bear, her face turned toward the window. Her mother, exhausted, dozed in the armchair beside her. When Marcus entered with Finn, Lisa's eyes lit up, just a glimmer at first. She didn't say anything, but she sat up straighter, holding out her small hand. Finn approached and gently placed his head in her lap. For a moment, neither of them moved. Then Lisa let out a soft, wavering giggle, her fingers finding the softness of Finn's ears. Her mother woke, startled, and the sight of her daughter, smiling, brought tears to her eyes. The hospital's social worker, Anna, snapped a photo on her phone. A perfect image of hope. Lisa's thin arms wrapped around Finn's neck, his yellow giraffe dangling from her hand, both of them framed by sunlight streaming through the window. Anna posted the photo to the hospital's social media with a short caption, "Meet Finn, the rescue dog who heals hearts. Today, he brought smiles to our bravest patient." Nobody expected what happened next. The photo was shared hundreds, then thousands of times. Comments poured in, parents of sick children, survivors of trauma, people who'd lost pets and found hope in Finn's gentle eyes. Local news outlets called the clinic, asking for interviews. By the weekend, the story had made national headlines. From abandoned to hero, Montana rescue dog inspires the country. At first, Marcus felt overwhelmed. He hadn't set out to make Finn famous. He'd only wanted to help a dog in need. And, as it turned out, a dog who helped others in ways no human ever could. But he couldn't ignore the requests that poured in. Letters and emails arrived daily, some asking for visits, others simply wanting to share how Finn's story had changed their lives. One letter came from a Vietnam War veteran in Billings. "I've battled nightmares for 40 years," he wrote in shaky script. "I saw your dog on TV, and for the first time in months, I slept through the night. I just needed to know there's still good in the world." A woman from Seattle wrote about her recovery from addiction, describing nights spent scrolling through Finn's photos, finding comfort in his journey. "If that dog can keep fighting," she wrote, "maybe I can too." Parents sent photos of their children hugging their own dogs, writing, "Thank you for showing us that kindness wins." Even children wrote notes in crayon, drawing Finn as a superhero or riding on clouds with his yellow giraffe. The clinic's lobby filled with cards and drawings, the walls plastered with hope in every color. Linda created a Finn's wall where people could post their own stories of loss and healing. Sometimes the staff would find visitors standing in front of the wall, reading every letter, wiping away tears. With all the attention came invitations. Schools across Montana, nursing homes in Wyoming, community centers from as far as Colorado. Marcus had to set boundaries, knowing Finn needed rest and time to simply be a dog. Still, they made as many trips as they could. At each stop, Finn worked his quiet magic. He'd find the person who needed him most. A lonely widower in the back of a church, a teenager in a wheelchair, a mother who'd lost her child, and offer them the comfort of his presence, his patience, and sometimes even his giraffe. One evening, Marcus sat with Finn on the porch, reading aloud from a stack of letters. "You're more than a survivor now, buddy," he said, his voice thick. "Your hope." Finn rested his head in Marcus's lap, eyes closing in contentment as if understanding every word. But the real miracle, Marcus realized, wasn't just the number of people Finn reached. It was the way he reached them. Finn didn't care about cameras or applause. He didn't understand headlines or hashtags. He simply saw the broken pieces in others and offered them his own, the parts of himself that had once been abandoned, that had learned to heal. In doing so, he created a bridge, a way for people to believe that, no matter what they'd endured, it was possible to start again. As summer approached, the clinic received a special invitation. The Montana Children's Hospital wanted to honor Finn at their annual fundraiser, celebrating him as the state's ambassador of hope. Marcus hesitated. He didn't want Finn to become a prop or a symbol, but when he looked at Finn, saw the calm steadiness in his eyes, he knew Finn had already become something bigger than either of them ever intended. On the night of the event, Finn walked onto the stage beside Marcus, his yellow giraffe proudly in his mouth. The crowd, children, parents, nurses, and doctors rose to their feet, applause filling the auditorium. Finn stood tall, unafraid, a living reminder that the world, broken as it sometimes was, could still be mended by love, by kindness, and by a dog who never gave up. For all the stories of hope, for every smiling child and grateful family Finn had touched, the scars of the past still lingered. Healing was not a straight line, Marcus reminded himself whenever he saw Finn tremble in his sleep, paws twitching as if running from nightmares only he could see. Even heroes carried their shadows. It started slowly first. A restless night here and there, Finn pacing the small apartment above the clinic as the world slept outside. Marcus would wake to the soft click of nails on hardwood, the sound of Finn circling, unable to settle. Sometimes Finn whimpered, sometimes he barked, a short, desperate sound that echoed down the hallway. Once, Marcus found him wedged under the kitchen table, body rigid, eyes wide and unseeing. Marcus tried every trick he knew. Warm blankets, quiet music, gentle reassurances. Sometimes Finn would crawl into Marcus's bed, shivering, pressing his body close, as if seeking shelter from a storm only he could feel. On those nights, Marcus wrapped his arms around the dog, whispering, "You're not in the box anymore, buddy. You're home. You're safe." The words became a mantra, spoken over and over beneath the Montana stars. One night, the terrors struck worse than ever. The apartment was quiet, the only sound the distant call of a freight train rolling across the prairie. Marcus awoke to Finn's frantic barking, sharp and wild, as if he were back in that box, trapped, abandoned, fighting to survive. Finn spun in circles, teeth bared, eyes glazed with panic. It broke Marcus's heart to see the strong, gentle dog reduced to this, haunted by memories that refused to let go. He didn't try to restrain Finn. Instead, Marcus opened the back door and let the cool night air flow in. He sat on the porch steps, blanket draped over his shoulders, and waited. Eventually, Finn came to him, still trembling, his breathing ragged. Marcus gently draped the blanket around them both, wrapping Finn in warmth. The sky above was wide and silent, stars scattered across the darkness like small promises. For a long while, neither moved. Marcus stroked Finn's fur, feeling the rapid beat of his heart slowly begin to settle. "You're not in the box anymore?" Marcus whispered, voice barely more than a breath. "You're here with me. You made it out." Finn pressed his nose into Marcus's palm, eyes finally clearing, the panic fading into exhaustion. It became their ritual on hard nights, two survivors under the vast Montana sky, reminding each other that healing wasn't something you finished once and for all. Sometimes the wounds reopened. Sometimes the dark crept back in. But together, they waited for the dawn. During the day, Finn's work continued. He visited the hospice center and the school, bringing comfort and smiles wherever he went. But Marcus noticed the signs, the hesitation before entering new places, the startle at unexpected noises, the way Finn sometimes glanced over his shoulder as if expecting his old life to come back for him. Marcus grew protective, watching over Finn the way Finn watched over others. He made sure visits never lasted too long, giving Finn plenty of time to rest and just be a dog. One afternoon at the school, a boy named Ethan sat quietly in the corner of the library, while other children read books and played games. Ethan's father had died suddenly the month before, and since then, he'd withdrawn from everything he once loved. The teachers didn't know what to do. Finn, sensing the boy's pain, wandered over, dropped his yellow giraffe at Ethan's feet, and sat beside him without a word. The boy looked at Finn, then at the giraffe, and for the first time in weeks he smiled, just a little, but enough. Marcus watched from across the room, feeling a familiar swell of pride and sorrow. After the session, as the kids left, Ethan stayed behind and asked Marcus, "Does Finn ever get sad?" Marcus nodded. "He does. Sometimes he has bad dreams. But I sit with him until he feels safe again. We help each other." The boy reached out and hugged Finn, holding on tightly. "I wish I could help him too." "You already are," Marcus said, ruffling the boy's hair, but the truth was, Marcus wished he could do more. He talked to Linda and the rest of the staff about Finn's night terrors, wondering if they should bring in a trainer or try new therapies. Linda, wise as ever, said, "He's got what he needs. Time, love, and you. Some scars just take longer to heal." Still, the memories haunted Marcus. He found himself staring at old photos of Finn, tiny and broken in the cardboard box, and wondered how much of that pain could ever truly be erased. He began journaling about the nights, about the rituals he and Finn shared. Writing it down, he realized, helped him see the progress. Yes, the nightmares returned, but each time they passed a little quicker, each time Finn leaned a little more on Marcus, and less on his fear. One evening, after a rough night, Marcus took Finn out beneath the open sky, far from the glow of town. He built a small fire, made coffee, and simply sat with Finn at his side. The wind moved through the grass, the world vast and forgiving. "It's okay if you're scared sometimes," Marcus said, voice steady. "We're all scared sometimes, but we're never alone. Not anymore." Finn rested his head on Marcus's knee, gaze fixed on the horizon, as if daring the sun to rise just a little sooner. In that quiet, Marcus understood what so many of Finn's new friends had already realized. True healing isn't about forgetting the past. It's about living with it, moving forward even when the weight feels too heavy. Finn would always carry the memory of that box. But now he carried something else too. Love, purpose, and the knowledge that he was never going back. And by the time dawn crept across the fields, painting the world gold, Finn was asleep, finally at peace. Marcus wrapped the blanket around them both and closed his eyes, thankful for the chance to witness the slow miracle of healing, night after night, for as long as it took. The arrival of autumn in Montana brought a crispness to the air and a slow turning of the leaves from green to gold and fire. The days grew shorter, but Finn's spirit only seemed to brighten as the world around him cooled. It had been nearly 6 months since he arrived at Ellison Veterinary Clinic in that battered cardboard box. And now, Finn was known everywhere as Lewistown's miracle dog. But for all the town's attention, Finn remained, at heart, the same gentle, soulful companion, his yellow stuffed giraffe, never far from his side. The giraffe had become more than just a toy. For Finn, it was a comfort, a symbol of safety, of belonging, of every warm hand and kind word that had helped him find his way. Children recognized Finn, not just for his dark eyes and battered ears, but for the bright yellow giraffe he carried wherever he went. It was his anchor, his shield against old fears. And yet, as Marcus would soon see, Finn was beginning to outgrow the need for it, even if neither of them realized it yet. It happened on a rainy Thursday at Jefferson Elementary, where Marcus and Finn were scheduled for another visit. The gym buzzed with quiet energy. Dozens of kids seated in a loose circle, their teachers perched on folding chairs around the edges. The principal greeted Marcus warmly, and the children's faces lit up as Finn entered, tail wagging, his trusty giraffe swinging from his mouth. The group that day included some new faces, among them a thin, quiet girl named Samantha. She'd recently lost her father to cancer. She'd become withdrawn, speaking only when prompted, and rarely meeting anyone's eyes. The teachers had told Marcus that Samantha spent most of her time staring out windows, or drawing alone in the art room. Finn, as he always seemed to do, gravitated toward her the moment they entered the circle. At first, Samantha didn't react. She sat on her knees, hands curled in her lap, her hair falling like a curtain between herself and the world. Finn patted over, dropped his yellow giraffe gently at her feet, and settled beside her, his warm body pressed against her knee. The other children giggled, nudging each other, but Finn paid them no mind. His focus was entirely on the girl beside him. Marcus watched quietly as Samantha slowly reached out, almost afraid to touch the giraffe. Her fingers traced the soft fabric, then clutched it close to her chest. For a long time, she just held it, breathing in the comfort of something that had carried so much love. Tears slipped down her cheeks, silent and unhurried, but she didn't look away. Instead, she leaned into Finn, burying her face in his fur. The teachers exchanged glances, some dabbing their eyes. The children went quiet, sensing the depth of the moment, and Finn, so often the one needing reassurance, simply stayed, letting Samantha cry, letting her hold his most treasured possession without a single whine or glance for its return. After a while, Samantha wiped her tears and looked at Marcus. Is it okay if I keep him for a little bit?" she whispered, her voice barely audible. Marcus smiled softly. "It's more than okay." For the rest of the session, Samantha carried the giraffe everywhere, clutching it as she colored, holding it tight as she listened to Marcus read aloud. Finn stayed beside her, occasionally nudging her hand as if to say, "I'm still here. You're not alone." When it was time to leave, Samantha hesitated, looking torn between gratitude and guilt. She turned to Marcus. Does he need it back?" Before Marcus could answer, Finn reached up and gently nudged the giraffe further into her arms. His tail wagged once, then he licked her cheek, sealing the gift. In that moment, something shifted, subtle but profound. Marcus realized what it meant. The giraffe, once Finn's lifeline, had become a gift for someone else. Finn no longer needed it as a shield. He was ready to give away the comfort he'd held on to for so long. Driving home that afternoon, Marcus kept glancing at Finn in the rearview mirror, both of them quiet, the absence of the giraffe feeling strange but not sad. When they arrived at the clinic, Marcus sat with Finn on the porch, letting the cool wind wash over them. "You did something big today," Marcus said, voice soft with awe. You let go. You helped someone else hold on. Finn pressed close, eyes full of peace. Marcus wrapped his arm around the dog, feeling the significance of the moment settle between them. It was a kind of passing of the torch, proof that healing is not about clinging to what comforts us, but about sharing it, passing it forward when someone else needs it more. In the days that followed, Marcus noticed changes in Finn. He seemed lighter, more at ease with himself. He still visited schools, hospitals, and the hospice center, always seeking out those who hurt the most. But now, instead of carrying his old giraffe, he carried a new kind of confidence, a quiet assurance that he was more than his past, more than his wounds. When children asked what happened to the yellow giraffe, Marcus would smile and say, Finn found someone who needed it even more. One afternoon, Samantha's mother stopped by the clinic, tears of gratitude in her eyes. She handed Marcus a note, written in Samantha's careful script. Thank you for letting Finn share his giraffe. He made me feel brave. I think my dad would have liked him. Marcus pinned the note to Finn's wall, the display now overflowing with letters, photos, and artwork from people whose lives Finn had touched. Each piece was a testament to the dog, who had once been forgotten, as now remembered everywhere for his generosity of spirit. For Marcus, watching Finn transform from survivor to healer was its own reward. He realized, perhaps more than ever, that the bravest thing anyone could do was to let go of the things that once kept them safe and use them to help others find their way. And as autumn deepened in Montana, the warmth between Marcus and Finn grew stronger, a partnership forged in pain but strengthened by the grace of letting go. That night, as Finn slept soundly for the first time in weeks, Marcus whispered, "You're not just a survivor anymore, Finn. You're someone's reason to hope." Underscore. Underscore, 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 underscore. Montana's first snow came early that year, softening the world in a hush of white and drawing families closer to hearth and home. At Ellison Veterinary Clinic, the windows glowed with warmth against the gray sky, and inside, Finn napped in his favorite spot by the radiator, occasionally twitching in his sleep, dreaming peaceful dreams at last. Marcus moved through the rooms, content, tending to the animals, and exchanging easy banter with Linda and the rest of the staff. In the community, Finn's story had settled into the legend, a living proof that hope was never wasted and kindness could ripple out in ways no one could predict. It was late afternoon when the quiet was broken by the hurried, breathless sound of someone pounding on the clinic door. Marcus opened it to find a young woman, her cheeks flushed with cold, eyes wide with worry, clutching a bundled towel to her chest. The towel was streaked with red, and beneath it a spaniel whimpered, paw twisted at an unnatural angle. Please help her," the woman gasped. "She got hit by a car, and I didn't know where else to go. I read about your dog, about Finn. You helped the hopeless, right?" Marcus gently ushered her inside, helping her settle into a chair as Linda prepared the exam room. The woman's hands shook as she stroked the dog's ears, tears brimming in her eyes. "I'm sorry. I couldn't let her die. I kept thinking, if that dog made it, maybe mine can too." As Marcus examined the spaniel, Finn appeared in the doorway, stretching after his nap. He trotted over, pausing to sniff the new arrival, then did what he'd learned so well. He rested his chin on the woman's knee, looking up at her with eyes that radiated patience and calm. The woman startled and then laughed through her tears, recognizing him from the photos and the stories. She reached down, stroking Finn's fur, her shoulders relaxing as the fear drained away. "I can't believe it's really him," she whispered. "Finn, you made it out. You saved so many. Can you help me believe she'll make it too?" Finn didn't answer, with words, of course, but he didn't need to. He stayed by her side, lending his silent strength as Marcus splinted the spaniel's leg, cleaned her wounds, and began the long process of healing. All the while, the woman spoke softly to Finn, telling him about her own journey, her loneliness after moving to town, the night she found the spaniel on the side of the road. how she'd almost given up hope before reading about a rescue dog who became a hero. By the time Marcus finished, the spaniel was resting comfortably, breathing deeply. The woman, her name was Emily, hugged Finn close, tears drying on her cheeks. "Thank you," she said, voice raw with gratitude. "Thank you for sharing your courage with us." After Emily left, Finn settled back onto his blanket, watching the snow fall outside. Marcus sat beside him, hand resting on the dog's back, both of them lost in thought. The clinic was quiet again, but it was a different kind of quiet, full, not empty, peaceful, not lonely. The story of rescue had come full circle. That night, Marcus took Finn for a walk through the snow-blanketed streets. The town was hushed, every house lit up with holiday warmth. As they walked, neighbors waved from porches, children pressed noses to frosted windows, and someone called out, "We love you, Finn." It was impossible not to feel the impact the dog had made, not just in single lives, but in the spirit of the whole community. Back at the clinic, Marcus settled in his office, reviewing a stack of letters sent from across the state, and now across the country. Stories of trauma, recovery, addiction, loss, and hope. Photos of children with their own therapy dogs, of old men smiling with Finn's story clutched in their hands, of families coming together in moments of pain and joy. One letter, written in a careful, looping script, caught Marcus's eye. It read, "Dear Dr. Ellison and Finn, when I lost my husband, I thought I'd never find comfort again. But reading about Finn made me brave enough to adopt an old shelter dog. We're both a little battered, but we're learning to trust again. Thank you for reminding me that there's always a way back." As Marcus pinned the letter to Finn's wall, he thought about the ripple effects of one small act of kindness, the way a single rescued dog could inspire countless others to hope, to try, to reach out. He turned to Finn, who was watching him with quiet, understanding eyes. "You didn't just survive, Finn," Marcus said, kneeling to wrap his arms around the dog. "You became someone's reason to. You turned your pain into purpose, your scars into hope. You showed all of us that healing isn't just possible. It's meant to be shared." Finn leaned into Marcus, tail thumping softly against the floor, his heart steady and sure. Outside, the snow kept falling, silent and gentle, blanketing the world in new beginnings. And inside the small, bright clinic, surrounded by letters and drawings, by stories and gratitude, a once broken dog slept soundly, secure in the knowledge that his journey was far from over, and that every act of compassion, no matter how small, could change a life forever. As Marcus turned off the lights, he looked back at Finn. Now more than just a survivor, more than just a healer. He was living proof that love, once given, never really ends. It simply grows, carried onward by those brave enough to give it away. And so, as Lewistown settled into another peaceful night, Finn and Marcus were ready for whatever came next, ready to answer the door, to offer a gentle head or a kind word, to rescue and be rescued again and again as long as hope remained.